there are times when it's difficult to join lines to make a polyline. In this little example, we're indicating a proposed new driveway through here, and we'll hatch it with a similar finish to the main driveway on the right hand side. So I start by picking various lines and breaking them and joining them, and if I zoom out a little now, you can see the polyline now extends through here, and I want to join some more segments to it. So I select this arc and this line, right click and select join. When I come back to that point, the arc is not joined, nor is the additional line. And the reason for that is that the existing polyline curls right around, but if you look at vertex number 11 in that polyline and I click here, can you see that the end point of that arc now is not congruent with the end point of that line? So in order to join this arc to that polyline, I need to move that last vertex. And you don't have to use the move command at all. gCADPlus makes it very easy for you indeed. You simply click on that handle and then move up and click on the other handle. So now when I pick that polyline that extends all the way around there, then I pick the arc. The beginning of the arc and the end of the polyline are the same point, and I should now be able to join them together and do that. So I'm working my way across here, creating a polyline boundary so that I can hatch in a proposed driveway through here, and I'll probably do it in lighter colour and lighter hatching than the existing main driveway on the right. So when I now join those, we've made a lot of progress on our driveway. So when you're trying to join polylines, existing lines to other lines to make them a polyline, and you then want to close it, sometimes that little tip can help you. Well, let's continue on to try and create this closed space. I'll pick draw and polyline. I'll pick up the end here, so I'll right click and go to an end point there, right click again to an end point and pick it up there. And I now want to draw an arc, so I right click and go into arc mode, and I'm asked for the end point of the arc. Well, this time I'll use the OSnap toolbar and come over here. Don't be concerned, let me zoom out a little, that you have the arc in the incorrect place. It's continuing on to draw an arc. gCADPlus is continuing, expects you to continue an arc, and I'll right click and take line and then snap to the end here and enter to complete it. So to finish up with, we want to match this arc, change the properties of the arc within the polyline. So I just pick that handle there, and I can use the OSnap perpendicular, and I can find the perpendicular to that point. The center point of that arc is now perpendicular to the existing one, and I think now if we pick that one and right click and join, we should now have a complete polyline covering the proposed area. It's going to be a proposed driveway, we'll imagine. It'll be paved in a material that's distinctly different from the material in the main driveway. In order to hatch that zone, we really do need to indicate that it's closed, and we could just set its color or hatch it, and you'll notice that the vehicle here is a fixed, it's got some fixed colors within it. So if I hatch through here, let me illustrate by just moving that one over there, and we'll rotate it, try and set it square on the driveway. Because it is hatched now. It's above the hatching. If we took one of the other symbols, you would see the hatching through it. So that filled symbol is quite a good one to use. So we're now in a position to hatch that space with whatever is appropriate for the design. I would not want it to be as heavy as the main driveway. Once the polyline has been drawn and it's closed, it's a relatively easy matter to hatch it, and I've hatched it with the AR sand pattern here. I want to have some indication. This is just a concept plan, so I want to indicate some heavy planting here, some more planting through there in another zone. And what I wanted to indicate to you is that if you have a polyline that just has lines and arcs, and then we hatch, this is a hatch pattern called HVeg, and it's one downloaded from the internet. And if we now hatch this area here, let's do it, draw and hatch, we'll pick the entity, which is the polyline, and it's a closed polyline, and we pick that HVeg CAD pattern, and I've got a scale of 0.2, and I'll OK it. The hatch pattern that you see here is applied. Let's delete it and do it again, and just apply some curve fitting, and then right click and repeat hatch. Again, pick the entity. Now there's a curve fit, a nicer looking shape, and we'll OK that, and in goes the hatch pattern. I'll then use modify, match properties, and match the color of that one. Note what happens. The hatch pattern doesn't look the same as it did before. So I'm going to do it again and remove that hatch pattern. I'm going to draw, hatch, repeat in exactly the same way, point to, pick the entity, and OK, and in it goes. Looks good. I'm not going to use the match properties this time. I'm just going to click in here and see that it's color 53, and I'll set that hatch pattern there to color 53. Now our boundary of our hatching is on a layer. I've moved it to the same as the dimension layer, so I'll just turn off the dimensions layer here, and now we have some. I'm relatively happy with that. As a concept, we can add some more text and dress things up a little better, but it's progressed quite nicely. So clearly our match properties tool doesn't match color properly in this instance, so there are times when you just have to do it manually. Well, I'd like to say a little about dimensions. This is a design for a site in the US, and the base unit here is decimal feet. And if we pick this dimension here, you can see in the properties box that the measurement is 13.025, whereas this one up here is 14.621, and so on. Now, construction teams would find that nomenclature just a little difficult to work with in the US environment. They're used to working in feet and inches. And to change this dimension style, which is called standard, into a dimension style that will read in feet and inches, we suggest you import a block which is available on the gCADPlus website, and the block's called Add Imperial Dimensions. Once you just insert that block, and I can now rub it out if I need to, the dimension style comes in when the block is brought into this environment. So we could pick this dimension and change from style standard to style architectural, and now the dimension reads 24 feet 7 inches, and the same applies here. We could select all of those and apply style architectural. I've left the leader line here, a big long one, over the top of the driveway, just to show you that that 24 foot 7 inch dimension is tagged to a set out point, which is marked with a point entity, and there's another set out point here, so we know its distance from both boundaries so we can locate it. And that set out point can be important for establishing various curves and other markers in the design. So to update dimensions in a drawing in the US to a system of displaying the dimensions, the distance doesn't change, it's still the same. If I click on it, it's still 24.62116 decimal feet, but now it can be read a lot more easily by a construction team. Well, our designer would like to have the final presentation to include some images of species that are going to be used in the design, and part of the design is a food garden, so what I'm doing at the bottom of the sheet is just inserting some images of species that may well be planted here. And to put the next image in, I go Format, Images, and I'll add one, and we've got our companion plant database running, and here is, you can have some lychees in the garden, so I just copy the location of that in our PC. Let's minimize that, and we'll just paste that location down and open. Path doesn't exist. I need to refresh this by just downloading it again and saving it. It's now complete. So now we should be able to select that, go back into gCADPlus, rub out that path and pick the new one, and now we can insert it into the design. This is a landscape view, so we're done. Now we need to bring that to the front, and we probably need to scale that a little as well. Let's bring it down to a scale of 0.2, 0.25, 0.25, and enter. And I'm sure we can find some space for doing that. We could just grab these, right click and move them just up a little bit so that they clear. And you might also want to pick the floating viewport and just give a bit of white space between the two of those. So let's zoom extents. So we now have our design sitting here, just the front garden. The layout tab is labeled front and some images are showing. Let's do a very quick PDF file version of this. It's not high resolution because that takes a little time, but let's let's use our file and save as a PDF. We'll pick a window around all of these. I've turned off the dimension layer. Let's put it on the desktop and call it gCADPlus drawing, and we'll overwrite the existing one. So that'll give a very quick PDF file. It's an impression of what the client might see if we print to a proper driver. So let's go Control O, Control L is it? And that gives us the whole sheet. And if I use Control Plus, we can zoom in and then we can pan down. So you can see the symbols look good, and the images are at quite respectable resolution. You do much better than that, of course, when you go to a high resolution file. But hopefully you can see that by downloading one of these palettes This happens to be a tropical area, so we've brought the tropical palette down. We can get quite an interesting view. It might not have the punch and the pop of a high resolution image from Photoshop, but I think it does reasonably well.